Here's something that sounds completely backwards. The reason you're not getting what you want is because you want it too much. This is what Marcus Aurelius discovered as Emperor of Rome, what the Stoics called the ultimate paradox of human nature. The harder you grip, the more slips through your fingers. Right now, you're probably stressed about something. That person who hasn't texted back. The job you're waiting to hear about. You're checking your phone constantly, losing sleep over outcomes you can't control. You're living in attachment hell, and it's destroying your chances of getting what you actually want. Here's the paradox. When you stop caring so desperately, everything starts working out. It sounds impossible, but the greatest minds in history, from Stoic philosophers to modern psychologists, discovered this counterintuitive truth that most people reject immediately. Hit that like button and subscribe right now, because what I'm about to share goes against everything our culture teaches about success, but it's the one thing that can finally set you free from the anxiety holding you back. Stick around for the revelation at the end that ties everything together. Trust me, you'll want to hear this. You know what's fascinating? The harder you squeeze something, the more likely it is to slip through your fingers. And I'm not talking about holding water here. I'm talking about your dreams, your relationships, your entire life. There's this invisible force sabotaging you, and you've probably never noticed it. It's your grip, your desperate, white-knuckled grip on outcomes. Every time you check Instagram and feel that pang of comparison. Every time you rehearse texts before sending them. Every time you lose sleep over things that haven't happened yet. That's the grip tightening. Here's what's really happening in your brain when you're attached to specific outcomes. Your nervous system floods you with stress hormones that literally impair your decision-making. Think about it. When did you last make a brilliant choice while anxious about the result? Probably never. It's like trying to thread a needle while someone shakes your hand. The attachment creates the very anxiety that prevents you from getting what you want. Your relationships suffer because you're so focused on where they're heading that you miss the actual connection happening right now. Your career stagnates because you're worried about the promotion instead of excelling at your current job. Modern life has weaponized this natural tendency into a full-blown epidemic. Social media has turned our attachment systems against us. Every post becomes an expectation. Every like becomes validation we desperately seek. We're living in constant reaction mode, checking notifications, measuring our worth by external metrics. The more we chase these digital validations, the further we drift from genuine success and inner peace. But what if I told you there was another way? What if the secret to getting everything you want was actually caring less about getting it? Now, before you think I've lost my mind, let me show you what the greatest thinkers in history discovered about this strange truth. Marcus Aurelius had it all figured out 2,000 years ago, and he didn't even have Instagram to mess with his head. This guy was literally the most powerful man in the world, Emperor of Rome, and yet he spent his private moments writing notes to himself about letting go of control. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Think about that for a second. The man who controlled an empire understood that real power came from not trying to control everything. He knew something we've forgotten in our modern obsession with hustle culture and grinding our way to success. Epicteto, who started as a slave and became one of history's greatest philosophers, gave us the ultimate framework for sanity. He divided everything into two categories: things within our control and things outside our control. Sounds simple, right? But here's where it gets interesting. According to his philosophy, the only things truly within your control are your thoughts, your responses, and your actions in this present moment. Everything else? Your boss's mood, whether that person texts you back, the weather, the stock market, what people think of you, all outside your control. Yet most of us spend 90% of our mental energy trying to influence that second category while neglecting the first one entirely. Lao Tzu called it Wu Wei, action without forcing, moving with the natural flow instead of against it. Picture a skilled martial artist who doesn't meet force with force but redirects it. That's what detachment looks like in practice. You're not passive or lazy. You're strategically aligned with reality instead of fighting against it. When you stop trying to force outcomes, you start noticing opportunities you couldn't see before. When you quit pushing so hard in relationships, people actually want to be around you more. When you release your death grip on your career, you make better decisions that naturally lead to advancement. But here's what these ancient masters understood that we've completely lost in our modern chaos. Attachment isn't just about wanting things, it's about needing them to happen in a specific way to feel okay about yourself. Stoicism isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about finding emotional freedom through acceptance. It's about developing what they called preferred indifference. Sure, you'd prefer success over failure, love over loneliness, health over sickness, but your inner peace doesn't depend on getting your preference. This is the mindset shift that changes everything, but first we need to understand why your brain fights it so hard. Your brain is basically a prediction machine trying to keep you alive. It's terrible at distinguishing between a saber-toothed tiger and a read receipt that hasn't appeared yet. Every attachment to an outcome triggers your primitive brain to interpret potential loss as a survival threat. That's why not getting the job feels like death. Why being single feels like exile from the tribe. Why your boss's silence after your presentation feels catastrophic. Here's where it gets messed up. The more you focus on what you want, the more your brain emphasizes what you lack. Neuroscientists call this negativity bias. You can receive 10 compliments and 1 criticism, yet only remember the criticism. When you're attached to outcomes, you're training your brain to scan for everything that could go wrong. It's like having a pessimist whispering in your ear 24/7. Your relationships suffer because you're looking for problems. Your performance drops because you're focused on failure scenarios. Social media has hijacked these ancient survival mechanisms and turned them against us. Every notification creates a micro-addiction cycle. Anticipation, dopamine hit, brief satisfaction, then craving for the next hit. You refresh your dating app like it's going to change your life. You check LinkedIn obsessively after applying for jobs. We've become attachment junkies, constantly seeking external validation to feel okay about ourselves. But here's what's fascinating. And this is where ancient wisdom meets cutting-edge science. Studies in positive psychology show that people who practice detachment actually achieve their goals more often than those desperately attached to them. Why? Because detachment creates space for creativity, reduces performance anxiety, and makes you more attractive to opportunities. However, there's a crucial difference between healthy detachment and just not caring at all. This is where most people get it completely wrong, and honestly, I don't blame them. The difference between detachment and indifference is subtle but absolutely critical. It's like the difference between being a skilled surfer and being a dead fish floating in the water. Both are going with the flow, but only one is fully alive and engaged. Indifference is giving up, checking out, becoming apathetic because you've been hurt or disappointed too many times. It's a defense mechanism that says, if I don't care about anything, nothing can hurt me. Detachment, on the other hand, is caring deeply while holding the outcome lightly. It's full engagement without desperate attachment. Think about the best athletes you've ever watched. They're completely focused and incredibly driven, but in the crucial moment, they're relaxed and fluid. They want to win more than anything, but they're not paralyzed by the fear of losing. That's detachment in action. They've prepared extensively. They give their all, but they're not emotionally dependent on the specific outcome for their self-worth. A basketball player who's attached shoots worse under pressure because he's thinking about missing. A player who's detached just focuses on form and technique, trusting that the results will take care of themselves. Same effort, same desire to succeed, completely different relationship with the outcome. In relationships, this distinction is everything. Indifference looks like emotional unavailability, playing games, or treating people as disposable. That's not attractive. That's just damaged. Detachment in relationships means you love fully. You're vulnerable when appropriate. You invest in people, but you don't try to control their responses or base your entire sense of worth on their approval. You can have preferences about how people treat you without being emotionally devastated when they don't meet your expectations. You can want the relationship to work out while being okay if it doesn't. This actually makes you more attractive because desperation repels people, but genuine confidence draws them in. Career-wise, indifference is phoning it in, doing the minimum, having no ambition. Detachment is giving your best effort while not being crushed by setbacks or intoxicated by successes. You can pursue opportunities aggressively while not being desperate for any specific one to work out. You can network authentically without being needy. You can take risks without being attached to specific outcomes. Schopenhauer said suffering comes from the gap between our desires and reality. Detachment doesn't eliminate desire. It creates flexibility around how those desires manifest. But how does this actually work in real-life situations where the stakes feel impossibly high? Let me tell you about Sarah, a friend of mine who was single for 3 years and absolutely miserable about it. She'd analyze every dating app conversation, plan out entire relationships after one good date, and basically interview potential partners like she was hiring for the position of person who will complete my life. Guess what happened? Nothing. Well, nothing good anyway. She came across as desperate, needy, and frankly exhausting. Then life forced her into detachment. She got promoted to a demanding role that consumed her attention, started focusing on her fitness and hobbies, basically stopped caring so much about finding the one. 6 months later, she met her now husband at a coffee shop. Not on an app, not through strategic dating, just through living her life fully without being desperate for a specific outcome. Here's what happened in her brain and behavior when she stopped gripping so tightly to the relationship outcome. First, she became genuinely interesting again because she was focused on her own growth instead of just trying to be what she thought someone else wanted. Second, she stopped filtering every interaction through the lens of "could this be my person?" which made her more authentic and fun to be around. Third, she wasn't evaluating every date like a job interview. So conversations flowed naturally. The paradox was that when she stopped desperately seeking love, she became the kind of person others naturally wanted to love. Not because she was playing games or being manipulative, but because desperation is repulsive and genuine confidence is magnetic. The same principle applies to career advancement, and I learned this the hard way. I spent 2 years gunning for a specific promotion, networking strategically, saying the right things to the right people, basically trying to force the outcome through sheer will and political maneuvering. I was so focused on getting that promotion that I stopped excelling at my actual job. When the position finally opened up, they gave it to someone else, someone who hadn't been obviously campaigning for it but had simply been doing exceptional work consistently. That rejection forced me into detachment. I stopped focusing on promotions and started focusing on becoming genuinely excellent at what I did. Within 8 months, a better opportunity opened up at a different company, and they recruited me specifically because of the reputation I'd built by focusing on excellence instead of outcomes. Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps, discovered something profound about human psychology. We can't pursue happiness directly. The more you chase it, the more it eludes you. But when you focus on something meaningful beyond yourself, happiness emerges as a natural byproduct. The same is true for success, love, respect, and everything else we desperately want. These things are like your shadow. Chase them directly and they run away from you. But walk towards something meaningful and they naturally follow. This isn't just philosophical fluff. It's practical psychology that you can implement immediately. But knowing the theory isn't enough. You need specific strategies to actually cultivate this mindset. Let's get practical because understanding this intellectually is one thing. Actually letting go when your nervous system screams "this matters so much" is something else entirely. First technique, the "so what" exercise. When you catch yourself spiraling about an outcome, literally ask, "So what if this doesn't work out?" Push deeper. And so what if that happens? Keep going until you realize even your worst-case scenarios are survivable. Marcus Aurelius gave us the second practice, morning and evening reflection. Each morning, spend 5 minutes thinking about your day ahead. But instead of planning how to control outcomes, focus on how you want to show up regardless of what happens. What kind of person do you want to be in meetings, conversations, challenges? Each evening, review not whether you got what you wanted but whether you acted according to your values. Here's a technique that sounds crazy but works incredibly well. Practice failing on purpose in low-stakes situations. Ask the barista for a free coffee. Request an upgrade at the hotel. Apply for jobs you're not quite qualified for. The goal isn't to fail. It's to desensitize yourself to the fear of failure that creates attachment in the first place. When hearing no doesn't kill you, you stop being desperate for yes. The most advanced practice takes us back to Lao Tzu's wisdom about strategic non-action. This means knowing when to push and when to pull back, when to effort and when to allow. In negotiations, sometimes silence is your best move. In relationships, sometimes space is your best response. This isn't passive. It's intelligent responsiveness to what the situation actually calls for. Seneca wrote about this as the art of timing. understanding that life has seasons, and trying to harvest in winter or plant in autumn will only lead to frustration. But what happens when you actually master this approach? What does life look like on the other side of attachment? The transformation that happens when you truly embrace detachment is nothing short of remarkable. And I need to be honest with you, it's not what you might expect. You don't become some Zen monk floating above human concerns, emotionally flatlined and indifferent to everything. Instead, you become more alive, more present, more capable of genuine joy than you ever were when you were desperately chasing outcomes. It's like the difference between trying to catch butterflies with a net versus sitting still in a garden and having them land on you naturally. When you stop chasing, life starts coming to you, but in ways you never could have planned or predicted. Your relationships completely shift, and this is where the paradox becomes most obvious. When you're not desperately seeking approval, people naturally want to give it to you. When you're not trying to control conversations, they flow more naturally. When you're not anxious about whether someone likes you, you become more likable because you're not putting pressure on them to validate you. Friends start seeking you out for advice because you're not emotionally reactive. Romantic partners are drawn to your stability and confidence. Professional relationships improve because you're focused on providing value rather than getting recognition. It's like you've stopped being a needy energy drain and become an energy source instead. Career and creative opportunities multiply in ways that seem almost magical, but there's a logical explanation. When you're not desperately attached to specific outcomes, you make better decisions because your judgment isn't clouded by anxiety and desperation. You notice opportunities you were too focused to see before. You take appropriate risks because failure isn't terrifying anymore. You collaborate better because you're not competing for scarce resources in your mind. You become the kind of person others want to work with, recommend, and promote because you're not exhausting to be around. Success starts feeling natural instead of forced because you're aligned with how things actually work instead of fighting against reality. But perhaps the most profound shift is in your relationship with yourself. You stop being your own worst critic because your self-worth isn't tied to external outcomes anymore. You can appreciate your efforts regardless of results. You can learn from failures without being crushed by them. You can enjoy successes without being afraid they'll disappear. You develop what Nietzsche called amor fati, love of fate, love of what is, including the challenges and setbacks. This isn't resignation. It's the ultimate form of personal power because you're no longer at the mercy of circumstances beyond your control. You realize that you've always had everything you needed to be okay, and that realization is more valuable than any specific outcome you were previously chasing. The question now becomes, are you ready to let go of the very thing that's been holding you back? So here we are at the moment of truth. You've just learned something that most people will spend their entire lives fighting against, that the path to getting everything you want runs directly through letting go of your desperate need to have it. But knowing this intellectually and actually living it are two completely different things. The question is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Are you going to close this video and go right back to checking your phone obsessively, trying to control outcomes, and staying trapped in the anxiety cycle? Or are you going to take the leap and start practicing strategic detachment today? Here's what I want you to do right now, and I'm serious about this. Think about one thing you're currently attached to, something that's causing you stress and anxiety. Maybe it's a relationship outcome, a career goal, or even something as simple as how many likes this video gets. Now I want you to practice that so what exercise I taught you. Ask yourself, so what if this doesn't work out exactly as I wanted to? Keep pushing deeper until you realize that your worst-case scenario is completely survivable. Feel that sense of relief? That's the beginning of freedom. But let me be completely honest with you. This isn't a one-time fix. Detachment is a practice, not a destination. Your brain is going to resist this because it's wired for attachment and control. You're going to catch yourself slipping back into old patterns, and that's perfectly normal. The difference is that now you have the awareness and the tools to course correct. Every time you choose presence over pressure, acceptance over anxiety, strategic surrender over desperate control, you're building the muscle of emotional freedom. If this video has shifted something in your perspective, if you can feel the possibility of a different way of living, then I need you to hit that like button right now. Seriously, stop what you're doing and click it. And if you want more content that challenges conventional wisdom and gives you practical tools for living with more peace and power, Subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell. This stuff works, but only if you're committed to doing the inner work that most people aren't willing to do. Here's my final challenge for you. For the next 7 days, practice detachment in one area of your life. Choose something you're currently stressed about and consciously shift from trying to control the outcome to focusing on your response and effort. Notice what happens to your anxiety levels, your decision-making, and your relationships. Then come back to the comments and tell me what you discovered. I read every single comment, and I'm genuinely curious about your experience with this. Remember, you already have everything you need to be okay right now. The love, success, and peace you're seeking aren't hiding somewhere in the future. They're available to you the moment you stop desperately grasping for them and start appreciating what's already here. That's not just philosophy. That's the practical path to everything you've been looking for. The question is, are you ready to let go?